welcome to Ethos, and we are truly grateful that you are here today. If this is your first time with us, we want to extend a warm thank you for joining us and want you to feel completely at home. Your next best step is to fill out a connection card. You'll find one on your seat with a few questions. Drop it off at the In This Together table on your way out, where we'd be thrilled to meet you and offer a small token of appreciation. For each card you receive, we'll make a donation on your behalf to an organization of your choice, listed on the card. We are excited to meet you. If you're interested in practicing generosity today, you have a couple of options. You can see the opportunities listed on the screen or drop your contribution in the box in the back of the room as you leave. For those who are new to Ethos, please know there's absolutely no pressure to give. Our hope and prayer are that your time spent with us today is refreshing and is a valuable gift in your life. Would you pray with me as we receive our generosity today? Father, there is nothing I have that you have not given me. All I have and am belong to you. To spend everything on myself and to give without sacrifice is the way of the world, but generosity is the way of those who call Christ their Lord, who love him with free hearts and serve him with renewed minds. We desire to increase in generosity because you, Father, are generous. It is the delight of your daughters and sons to share your traits and to show what you are like to all the world. Amen. We are excited to announce that Ethos Community's registration opens today online. Registration closes on January 5th, and they will launch on January 12th. So head over to our website to find your community. Ethos Prayer Gathering is this Tuesday, December 10th at 7 p.m. We have moved prayer gatherings to take place at the Bale Kenyon location, so make sure you show up there rather than at Ethos & Co. Ethos Young Adults, we are hosting a Christmas party on the 17th, and we hope that you can be there. Stay tuned for more information, and in the meantime, give us a follow on Instagram. And Ethos Youth, your White Elephant Christmas party is the next day at 7 p.m. If you would like to participate in the gift exchange, please bring a gift under $10. On your way in today, you should have received an Advent devotional card. These devotionals are a way to center ourselves on the advent of Christ together. As the famous Christmas carol proclaims, "Let every heart prepare him room." Let's make room together for these Advent devotionals. And if you didn't get one on your way in, you can head to the In This Together table to grab yours after the worship experience. Christmas with Ethos is so soon. It's coming up on the 21st and the 22nd. We will have 5 services for you and your family to choose from. On Saturday, we will have services at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And on Sunday, you can attend at 10 a.m., 5 p.m., or 7 p.m. To learn more and to find some invites that you can post on social media, head over to our website. Finally, some even more exciting news. Our 2025 bread journals are going on sale next week for $5. There will be a version for both you and your kids, so make sure you come prepared to purchase one next Sunday, the 15th. Now, let's jump into week 2 of Advent.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all today. You doing good today? Do you like the person sitting next to you this morning? Come on, can you let them know? Can you say, I'm glad that you sat where you did today? Hey, it really is a joy to be here with y'all this morning. And if the event that you're a little bit newer to this space, maybe it's your first time hanging with us on a Sunday morning, whether in person or watching online. My name is Jordan, and I have this unique privilege of being the lead pastor here. And we just want to say thanks for hanging with us. And you are this morning surrounded by, I found this to be absolutely true, some of the most kind and generous people that you're going to meet all week long. And Ethos, your generosity was on full display yesterday as we hosted our annual Ethos Food Pantry Christmas celebration, which is a bit of a mouthful to say, but it was so much fun as we invited all of our food pantry families that we're in regular relationship with throughout the week, month, and the entirety of the year to come and celebrate Christmas with us. We got a few pictures to share with you as well, just to kind of see what took place yesterday. And one of the unique things that we were able to provide this year is some professional photography for their families to take pictures so that they could keep them just as keepsakes and kind of commemorate the season together for years to come. And this would not be possible, or at the very least, it would be very difficult if it weren't for your consistent and just continued generosity. And so we just all want to say thank you for continually sacrificially giving in such a way that provides opportunities like this for our food pantry families to celebrate alongside one another, and as well as with our entire justice and outreach teams. And of course, this season, in so many ways, we see generosity on consistent display, maybe more than most seasons throughout the year. And in large part, as we kicked off Advent last weekend, we recognized that we're really celebrating the generosity that Christ first revealed to us so many years ago through his first Advent, or the first arrival of Jesus. And then for week 2 of Advent, as we light our second candle, just commemorating the fact that the light of Christ in his arrival, or his advent, is growing closer and closer. And so it's with great anticipation that even for us as a church, we get to celebrate Advent, or the 4th Sunday this year, with our Christmas celebrations. And as Andrea just shared in Ethos News, we've got 5 services that will all be hosted here on both the 21st and the 22nd. And so surely there's probably a service available and time available for you. And I, for one, am praying that the Buckeyes do not play at the 4 o'clock or the 8 o'clock game on Saturday the 21st. And so I'm crossing my fingers for the noon, or even better yet, the Friday night game. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's most likely going to be when the Buckeyes are playing. And hopefully we get a home game. Hopefully we don't lose twice at home, back to back. Anyway, but I want to invite you to come and hang out with us. Now, something we're doing a little bit different this year, something that we recognize was really a necessity, is we're creating the opportunity for you to reserve a spot for free. So we have registration for which service you're going to be attending. Now, this is brand new, so in the event that you've been coming to Ethos for a long time, this is not normative for our Christmas celebrations. And so this is kind of one of those times where you're like, oh yeah, I know about Christmas. I've been there 100 times before. Well, this is kind of the moment where I'm asking for you to lean in and just be mindful of the fact that this year we're asking that you would register. Let us know which service you're going to be attending. This is not to make it difficult for people to come, but rather to ensure the best opportunity for them to have a seat ready and available for them. We were just concerned that there could be 1 or 2 services where everybody decides to come out, and we would just have a really difficult time hosting and creating a good experience, in particular for anybody who would be a guest hanging with us at Ethos, maybe for the first or second time. And so you can register for yourself, just for anybody who will be in the auditorium, in the sanctuary at one of those services. Now, in the event that you send this link, which will have all of the information available, you can send this to your friends, use it as a resource to share and invite your neighbors, coworkers, whoever it may be. This link also provides a bunch of information, FAQs, and different things about what to expect for Christmas services, as well as the link to register. But in the event that somebody forgets to register, you're like, can they still come? Yes, absolutely. Again, this is not to make it difficult or to even keep people from attending. It's just to help us the best that we can ensure that there's a seat for them. You can always change if last minute you decide, hey, you know what? I said I was coming to 5 o'clock Saturday. I'm going to 10 a.m. Sunday now. You can jump online and change it, or if it's really last minute, just still show up. We'll make sure that there's a space and the best that we can, try to create the best environment for everybody. Y'all on the same page? We good? Got it? Registration. Got it, Garrett? You shook your head. Okay, good, great. Well, hey, today, for week 2 of Advent, we've got a friend with us this weekend who just came in late last night from Vancouver, Washington, the other Vancouver. And as I shared last week, Pastor Joshua Porter, he is an author and a pastor, and his book, Death and Deconstruction in particular, was really beautiful and helpful for me. It reads as a bit of a memoir in so many regards, but it's also a resource. I mean, I've given dozens of these books out at this point. It's a resource that I've used so many times for folks who are just walking through a season, or have friends that are just walking through a season of deconstruction. And so I've asked Josh to come and share with us. As I mentioned last weekend, originally we were thinking the previous series, but the timing just didn't work out. So I've asked him to kind of creatively connect this subject to Advent in some way, somehow, this subject of deconstruction of the Christian faith. And so that's what Josh is doing. So without any further ado, I'm passing this really audacious and challenging topic off to our friend, Josh Porter. Can you give it up and honor God as we honor our friend Josh this morning?
I can easily connect this to Christmas. Easily. In fact, at my church, I describe myself every week this time of year, this is a true story, as the pastor of Christmas. And I take this title seriously. You may not know it to look at me, but I take Christmas really seriously. In fact, this time of year, I drive really slow through my neighborhood, slower than usual. I make my way down my street, looking left and right, watching for houses festooned with twinkling ropes of light that make their way across where I live, always dripping rain gutters and up shingled rooftops. I watch for the one or two glowing nativity scenes that I know of in my neighborhood, and I squint, not wanting to miss wreaths and red bows and plastic snowmen and waving Santas, and I soundtrack the scene with carols, both classic and contemporary, at all times. My car's heater fighting the freezing chill beyond the protective glass and chrome. I turn corners down otherwise overlooked streets at this time of year to see the houses really done up, and I take side streets and detours to show my kids a few great houses that are hiding here and there. Look, this one has a leg lamp in the window, and over there, that one has a Grinch on there, all that stuff. And if you watch closely, this is true. You can see families huddled together through windows, and you can see parents gathered up with their children watching Kevin McAllister jumping on his parents' bed, and you can see plumes of gray smoke spiraling upward out of chimney tops, and you can see living rooms with shimmering garlands and pine trees with blinking bulbs and fires and fireplaces. And then the word peace starts to show up everywhere on decorative holiday lights and banners. You hear it repeated in pop covers of old hymns issuing from every speaker and every store. This is one time a year where Amy Grant gets played constantly on mainstream radio stations by the grace of God. And then we tell stories about peace, and we talk about peace as if it's this kind of wonderful truce that covers the world at Christmas time, like snow, and as bell ringers call for donations and toy drives accumulate dolls and action figures, and everyone gets a little nicer and a little less horrible, at least for a little bit. But really, the painful truth that many people in this room know well enough is that the world stays as broken as it has ever been, and we are still here, and we're waiting. Waiting is a very hard thing to do. In the fall of 1987, I was 5 years old. 2 months before Christmas, a 1.5-year-old girl was playing in her aunt's backyard, and she fell into an abandoned water well. The opening was 22 feet deep and only 8 inches wide, which made it inaccessible to rescue workers because they're too big to get into it. So desperate to rescue this girl, a rescue mission ensued. She was pinned inside this tiny shaft, unable to move. She had one leg above her forehead, and an hour after she'd fallen, she was still there. 2 hours later, rescuers were still deliberating on how to retrieve her safely. In fact, they were still deliberating as the day became night. The best plan that they could come up with was to drill a parallel shaft vertically into the ground, and then, once they got to where she was, move horizontally toward the bottom of the well where the tiny girl was wedged. But this was, as you can imagine, difficult, complicated. It would take a lot of time. So the night became morning, and the little girl was still pinned inside the 8-inch wide cylinder, steeped in darkness, 22 feet below the Earth's surface. 12 hours later, she was still there. As rescuers raced forward with this tunneling effort, concerns mounted that she had hurt herself, or maybe she had not survived at all. So they lowered a microphone into the well, and those on the surface could hear the girl, sometimes crying, sometimes singing to herself. As the rescue effort barreled on, news coverage at this point proliferated around the country. As millions of Americans, this is one of my earliest memories, millions of Americans watched in anxious desperation, and then a second day passed. Eventually, 58 hours altogether for rescuers to break through the rocks surrounding the shaft and carefully pull the girl from the tiny prison that had been her home for nearly 3 days. But they did it. They pulled her to safety. She was rescued. She's alive today. She says she can't really remember the incident, having been so small when it happened. But news footage played around the world at this time, showcasing the girl's mother. I went back and watched it this week, showcasing the girl's mother. She was nearly mad with panic and anxiety, and she scrambled amongst paramedics and miners, helpless to save her own daughter, helpless against the horrible march of time. And in news broadcast after news broadcast, the terrible, ominous refrain rang out in homes across the country, across the world, time is running out. That is an Advent story because it's a story about waiting to be rescued and about how waiting is really hard and about how while you wait, you sometimes feel as if you're losing hope. While you wait, when waiting is hard, you sometimes feel like giving up. The world huddled around the dull glow of their television sets in 1987, momentarily unified in the hope that this little girl would be rescued before it was too late. One article I read this week said that, and I quote, "The world held its breath." That is an Advent story. If you have a Bible, go ahead and open to the Gospel of John chapter 15. We'll get there in just a bit, but go ahead and make your way to John chapter 15. If you're new to the Bible, feel free to consult the table of contents. That's why it's there. First, again, my name is Josh Porter, and like Jordan said, I help lead a church called Van City in Vancouver, Washington. And I am a Christian, which feels like a weird thing to say after I'm already up here talking for a while now, but just to put your mind at ease, I am a Christian. And just listen to me own that term. I realize that this is, for some anyway, not here, but out there, a culturally confusing and politicized word, Christian. And I should tell you, Ethos, I live in the Portland metro area, whereabouts to describe oneself as a Christian invites a certain amount of, shall we say, scrutiny. But heck, I like it. In fact, I like it more than I ever have. There was a time, I'll admit, there was a time many years ago when I, like many of my fragile generation, wanted to distance myself from, all the ugly connotations ferried on the back of a term like Christian. So I used other terms like Jesus follower instead, which is also a fine term. You can use that as well. But, and this may surprise you because we don't know each other yet, but I am, at heart, a contrarian. Something of a provocateur, I'm told. So I like seeing people twist up their faces as if biting into a lemon when I use the word Christian. I'll be at like a checkout counter in Portland, Oregon, and the clerk will ask, "How's your day going?" Because you got to occupy that space with something. And I'll say, "It's pretty good. I just finished work. I'm trying to let them off the hook." And they say, "Oh yeah, what do you do?" And so, okay, we're doing this. So I say, I'm a pastor of a church. A church, they ask, audibly nervous. This is true. It happens all the time. Well, and then what kind of church? Now you don't know what to say. And then they try to answer for me. They're like, is it like Unitarian, New Age, progressive, spiritual, Buddhist infusion? Is it like is it a multi-religious identity safe space? And then I tell them, none of the above, none of the above. And then I hit them with the word, Christian. That's right, Jesus, the Bible, the whole thing. And then you watch them go inward, and you can see their heads swimming with questions. Oh, no, is he one of them? Is he angry? Is he some kind of militant, politicized conspiracy cultist? And of course, being none of those things, I could set their minds at ease, but I don't because it's funny. So, have a good day, I say. Now if you'll just give me my oat milk and my Impossible Burgers, I'll be on my way. And I drive my little Prius home listening to angry punk rock music because I'm so rebellious, But I am a Christian. Christian raised by Christians. I'm the product of a Christian upbringing and a quasi-Christian environment. I was raised in the Deep South during the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s, and I am still a Christian, a pastor even. This means that unlike many of my peers, I have survived my own season of what is now often described as deconstruction, which I know is another divisive word, a trigger word or whatever it is that we're saying these days. So that's tough for me as your guest speaker this morning. I wasn't invited during the sacred season of Advent to unpack the nativity story so much as the way that what we believe about God coming into the world divides the world, just like Jesus said it would, and what happens when it does. And that is controversial stuff. So, for your sake, not mine, for your sake, I have tucked into this morning's sermon a couple of palate cleansers to lighten the mood. I'll give you one in just a minute here, to build anticipation. And then you'll get another one near the end, in case I'm losing you at that point. So, see, a couple of years ago, I did write this book called Death to Deconstruction, a not-so-subtle title. And I have found across many conversations before and after that it's kind of like an ink blot test. How does that make you feel? What do you see when you see that title? Do you hear Death to Deconstruction and think, oh, finally, someone's sticking it to the progressive pseudo-spiritualists and their watered-down, deconstructed false religion? Some people feel that way. Or do you think, Death to Deconstruction, deconstruction saved my life. Deconstruction is good. Isn't it necessary? Or do you think, what the heck is deconstruction? I didn't insist on a title like Death to Deconstruction, oblivious to inevitable questions and pushback. But one thing I've seen in all of it is a common, recurring motif. Young or old, deconstructed or orthodox, either side of the socio-political aisle, every generation feels like the world is unraveling. I was a kid, like I said, during the emergence of the AIDS crisis and the war on drugs in the 80s, but not long before I got here, there had already been the Manson family murders in 1969, The Exorcist in 1973, and before that there'd been Woodstock and beat poets and uproar over civil rights activism in the 60s, jazz and Elvis in the 50s. Heck, the ban on interracial marriage in California didn't end until 1948. And before that, there had been Nazis and A-bombs and death camps, and before any of that, there had already been civil war and colonization and manifest destiny and musket smoke and cannonballs and wholesale slaughter. And before any of that, there had already been the Black Plague and Iron Maidens and medieval torture chambers. And long before those things, there were Greek pederasts as political leaders and Roman emperors who fed children to lions. The world has always been insane. So, here are some cows that have been shampooed and blow-dried. That's a palate cleanser. It's nice, right? Okay, deep breath, right? We're fine now. My point is, every generation faces... Are we recovered from the cows? Every generation faces unique issues of cultural evolution that challenge our perception of any shared ideology or any sense of common morality, and it makes us wonder, generation to generation, if what we believe about the world really makes any sense. That is the long waiting, the Advent story, the now and not yet reality of the kingdom of God. Because crawling backward down the ideological timeline of the civilized world, sure, some things change, but some things don't. The political right, for example, paints a picture of a once glorious, upright, moral utopia sliding hopelessly into the ethical disrepair of the runaway nightmare train of progressivism. But hundreds of years ago, the sexual ethics of some of the biggest cultural hubs in the greatest empires of the world would make America in 2024 look like an episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. So cultural moral panic, it just sort of slides from side to side, from right to left of the socio-political aisle, depending on the era. And then, through all that, with all of that constantly unfolding across the passage of time and throughout oscillating epics of cultural evolution and devolution, through all of that journeys the disciple of Jesus. That's a lot of us. It is now, as it ever was, a sort of resistance movement against the gravitational pull of narcissism and cynicism and outrage, a narrow road that is neither right nor left, not a war against the culture and not an assimilation into the culture. There is only the way, faithfulness as an act of rebellion, which brings us to John 15. See, years ago, when the first rumblings of panic over Jesus dropouts moved through what we called evangelicalism, I remember reading someone, this is a long time ago, I remember reading this quote: "The deconversion moment has become the new conversion moment." Deconversion had apparently become the new conversion. Just as so many of us stood huddled under the concert lighting of youth camps and festivals, high on teenage angst, our brains soupy with hormones. We cried and we raised our hands and worshiped and we said, I accept Jesus Christ into my heart as my personal Lord and Savior. Well, now these teenagers had become 20-somethings and 30-somethings and fed up with the lunacy of suffering and evil and religious hypocrisy and nationalism and a Bible that they'd been clobbered with rather than being taught how to read and understand. They were all having new teary-eyed emotional conversion moments out of the brittle husk of American civil Christianity and into something else. Maybe they'd be agnostic. The thrill of ambiguity, embracing no answers instead of firm ones. Or maybe they'd go full atheist. What better way to stick it to God than erasing him altogether? Or maybe not. Maybe they become syncretists. They'd move down the buffet aisle of spirituality light and, just kind of make their own plates. Small serving of Buddhism, a few slices of Christian mysticism with no crust, some Hindu philosophy as dressing, served up on a hearty bed of American progressivism. But anyway you slice it, we're out, they said. Ex-evangelical, they said. Deconstructed, they said. Post-youth group. Take that, Mom and Dad. Take that, Pastor Jordan. I'm out. And obviously, I'm sort of ribbing on the whole thing, but really anyone who has followed Jesus for more than just a little bit understands that doubt and wrestling and transforming one's faith, these are all necessary and inevitable dimensions of the discipleship journey. And I would never presume to know exactly what those dark nights of doubt and second guessing and spiritual cold feet have been like for every Christian in this room. But I do know that each and every one of us either has had them or will have them eventually. And if you read the New Testament, the life and teachings of Jesus, the beginnings of the Jesus movement, you can see how much writing is dedicated to the inevitability of our own struggle to keep the faith and the likelihood that many, tragically, will not keep the faith. In John 15, in which Jesus famously promised, I'm the vine, you're the branches, remain in me, he keeps saying over and over and over again, which spiritual formation writers across centuries have emphasized as like the secret. That's the truth, the power of real and meaningful transformation is proximity, intimacy, closeness to Jesus, that Jesus is more than an intellectual set of ideas or religious ethics. He is the living relational God. If you stay with Jesus, if you keep him before your thoughts and hold him in your heart and you turn his words over in your mind and you read them at dawn and at dusk, if you sit before him in conversation and in reflection, to be close to Jesus in these ways reveals the love of God, and the love of God is the thing that transforms us. So, Jesus said, be with me, abide, remain in him, remain in him, remain in him. He is the vine, you are the branches. But after all that stuff about vines and branches, Jesus goes on. So look at John 15, beginning with verse 18. Jesus says to his followers, to his disciples, his apprentices, if the world hates you, keep in mind it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you, a servant's not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father as well. If I had not done among them the works no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. As it is, they have both seen, and yet they have hated both me and my Father. But this is to fulfill what is written in their law. They hated me without reason. When the advocate comes, the Holy Spirit, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth who goes out from the Father, he will testify about me. And you also must testify, for you have been with me from the beginning. Then look at chapter 16, verse 1. All this, meaning all of that, the vine, the abiding, the warnings, the inevitability of hardship, all this I have told you so that you will not fall away. Abiding in the vine is more than the first priority of discipleship. You guys talk about this, be with Jesus. It is the armor against the arrows of deconstruction and deconversion. All this I have told you so that you will not fall away. Which means Jesus knew that we could, that we might. He'd been there before us, walking the road of faithfulness. When he was tempted to do otherwise, he went deeper into faithfulness before us to show us how. And he gave us the secret of resolve before the inevitability of our own deconversion moments. Remain in me, remain in me, remain in me. The world has always been a crazy place, dark and twisted and broken, with all its power mongering and jockeying for position and moral high ground, the swinging pendulum of fundamentalism, right, left. And against this backdrop, everyone on the journey of discipleship, young and old, mature, immature, has and will arrive at junctions, kind of forking out to abandon faith or to wade deeper into the wild waters of more faithfulness still. The road of discipleship, not unlike the road of living at all, is complicated and wrought with suffering. Merry Christmas. The regular guy will be back next week. Anyone who follows Jesus knows this already. Sometimes you walk upright, sometimes you even run, you throw your head back and you bask in the all-warming glory of amazing grace, but then you fall and you fail and you crawl and you scramble and you teeter and you quit and you come back and you cheat and lie and fight and hate and start over again. We go forward, but we also go backward and then forward again. We get hurt, we hurt other people. But the thing about discipleship is that along that dangerous and narrow road, there are no walls fencing you in. You're not trapped. You're not confined to following Jesus. Discipleship cannot be coerced. You either walk the road or you don't. There are no off-ramps because anyone can simply abandon the road at any time, at any point in the journey, and many, as you know, do. But even though there are no off-ramps, so to speak, there are, I think, certain moments. I think of these as deconversion moments, instances or even ongoing seasons of significant doubt or despair or frustration or disillusionment or suffering, when the trail becomes arduous. The trials of the road become, we think, too much. And we kind of pause where we are and we lift one leg and we let that foot hover above the ground just to the left of the road. And we ask ourselves, what if I quit walking it? What if this is where I leave? In his memoir, All Is Grace, author and ex-priest Brennan Manning, he wrote about one of those deconversion moments that came when he least expected. It's an incredible story. He'd been living amongst the poor in rural France, shoveling manure, washing dishes, and bringing water to villagers on a donkey's back. And it was in that amazing-sounding season that in prayer one evening, the Spirit of God exposed his hidden selfishness. And he was devastated by the news. He wrote, I saw my life as vitiated by pride, by the inordinate desire to be liked and loved and approved and applauded and accepted. My motives were peeled away to reveal complete self-centered yuck. I thought maybe I had grown beyond it or out of it, but I hadn't. He went on to confess, I felt like my life was a waste. I determined to commit spiritual suicide, cut myself off from God and the church and my brothers, and turn my back on it all. And it was then, in one of the most vivid deconversion moments of his life, that another priest found Brennan in the chapel and just asked him what had happened. He was clearly upset. What's going on? And Brennan told him everything. And this is where it gets really interesting. The other priest said this, and I quote, "You are on the threshold of receiving the greatest grace of your life. You are discovering what it means to be poor in spirit. Brother Brennan, it's okay not to be okay." And so, Brennan Manning looked down at his hovering foot, as it were, and returned it to the narrow road, took another step forward. But if you know that guy's story, you know there'd be a lot more falling before it was over. There would be more deconversion moments, more invitations into greater faithfulness. But this one, that night in the chapel in France, it had been repurposed for a new conversion. It was an opportunity to bail out, yeah, but also an invitation into deeper faithfulness. He could have quit, but he didn't. And the not quitting that night became a new resolve that wasn't there before. Depending on where you're sitting, many American Christians, anyway, have begun to feel as if things are breaking down. American evangelicalism seems to be, to many around the country, toppling beneath the weight of its own politicization. The stragglers are making for new camps on the outskirts of orthodoxy. The youth group kids have grown up and they're deconstructing. The conservatives are going liberal. The progressives are becoming fundamentalists. The Calvinists have given up determinism. The Baptists are going Catholic. The megachurch conglomerates are falling to sex scandals and embezzlement. The Christian influencers are being canceled. It's really bad out there. So here's a baby cow that's been shampooed and blow-dried. A calf is what they're called. I don't know why in my notes I wrote a baby cow. Because, look, that's cute. That's a baby cow. Regroup. Maybe it seems as if everything is uniquely falling apart in some unprecedented way. But it's always been like this. Maybe it feels, even to you sometimes, I don't know where you're at, but maybe it feels even to you sometimes as if the Christian machine is breaking down. People are bailing out. Things are falling apart. But we have to constantly and consistently remind ourselves and one another that this movement is much bigger than a tiny demographic in one place at one time, and that for centuries and around the world, disciples of Jesus have been enduring the long waiting together, just like us. But that because of what we believe about Advent, that God came to us and that God is with us, and yes, we are still waiting, but no, we are not waiting alone. And that because of Advent, what we believe about God, that he lowered himself into our brokenness to save us, we believe that he will come to save us once again and once and for all. And this in-between space is an opportunity to move closer to Jesus, to remain in him, because proximity to Jesus reveals the love of God, and the love of God is what transforms us. But we lose track of our unfettered access to God's love, bent and broken by time and confusion and hardship, and our tired hearts begin to imagine God not as someone to know and love, but as an equation to be resolved. I'm 41 years old. Most of my life I've been a Christian. I was raised by Christians. I grew up in church. And I, like many, if not most, born into such circumstances, at one time or another, I spurned my upbringing and I attempted to jettison my faith. But I, like so many others, found that the more I sought to void the empty religious pageantry and power-mongering of what I thought were scoundrels and hypocrites, the truth of Jesus would not go with it. For they were strange to one another, as if they were, after all, not one and the same. So I, as an act of spite against the rule keepers and what I believe to be backwood bigots of my deep South upbringing, I embraced a new, soft, flowery love God who found nothing at all wrong with the world other than what I found wrong with it, of course, and who could not be bothered with anger, not even against evil, because he was little more than a pink vapor of positive energy and affirmation and approval. But I couldn't find Jesus in him either. Because anyone who has experienced love, even flawed human love, knows that love is a messy, blood-spattered thing of real guts and real pain. And that anger burns against injustice in love. And that real love is forever drenched in tears of sorrow and longing. And for most of my life, what I wanted more than any other thing was the same simple longing that burns within the heart of just about every human being to ever live before they have words to describe it or even the depth of consciousness to come to terms with its longing. I wanted, of course, to be loved. But in a terrible twist of irony wrought by my own sin and the manipulation of the evil one, I was loved but did not or would not acknowledge or receive it. What a terrible waste of my life, years of it, that I went walking in circles, with bread and water in my hands and constantly starving to death. I somehow became convinced that God was set against me, unknowable and capricious, someone who might make me chase after things that I could never get. And really, I wanted to know that God loved me, not know it on paper or in some, detached doctrinal sense, but to know that God loved me the way that I love my wife or my children, that I don't just love them, I like them. They bring me joy. They don't disappoint me, that my affection burns for them, a great blaze of unquenchable love forever untarnished by their mistakes, their imperfections. I love them. All this I have told you so that you will not fall away. For centuries, all over the world, men and women have seen and experienced this love and been changed by this love, are being changed by this love. It's not just our little corner of the movement, our little place and our little time. And when we lose sight of that, we can get discouraged, or worse. We forget the scope of this family and the resilience of it. In his book, After Doubt, Professor A.J. Swoboda recognizes the irony of the fact that statistically, the quintessential deconstructionist inevitably falls victim to the very thing they most violently critique. He wrote, "If I, a white Christian male, were to take elements of someone else's culture and use them for my own purposes, they would call it cultural appropriation. But if I take the ancient writings of the Bible and change them to fit my purposes with no regard for the intent with which they were written, they call me enlightened and evolved." How could this be? He goes on to say, "For every millennial, affluent white college student who is choosing to deconstruct their Christian faith, there are 5 non-white people with less privilege in this world who are finding in the Bible the greatest message one could ever imagine." And that's not just inspirational fluff. There are numbers to back this up. In reports published in 2022, Dr. Gina Zerlo, who's a historian, a sociologist, a demographer, she demonstrated that her research indicates that 67% of the world's Christians live in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and Oceania, and the largest sum of them live in Africa, and the majority of them are women. And the median age of Christians in sub-Saharan Africa is just 19. Now, here's why this matters. Maybe sometimes, from where some of us sit, it can feel as if the historic Christian movement is being stripped for parts by jaded American ex-evangelicals, but it just isn't true. Maybe it seems as if Christianity has been run into the ground by American scandal and marred beyond repair by televangelists and politicians, but it hasn't, because the average Christian is not represented by American politicians or by some cynical white West Coast podcaster dude. The average Christian in the world is a teenage girl in Nigeria. The same Christian movement from 2,000 years ago is thriving all over the world where, though always complicated and imperfect, it remains undefeated by the cynicism and corruption that you and I take for granted. And the hilarious irony is that a majority white, affluent Western demographic has committed to such a vocal critique of a movement founded by and primarily sustained by non-white people who had and have no affluence or privilege to speak of. We belong to something bigger than us, bigger than this room and this group, something ancient and beautiful, broken and imperfect though it may be. And we need to come back to this space week in and week out and look around a room full of broken, imperfect people with their hands outstretched to God, singing, praying, listening, and learning, and remember the breadth and beauty of the imperfect family of God, beloved by Jesus, so much so that he called it his bride. And we say to one another in our mornings of joyous worship and in the dark nights of lonely faithfulness and long waiting, I'm not alone in this. I belong to a family, imperfect though we may be. Ours is a way of life, a kingdom that grows around the world for thousands of years, and I will walk this road with my brothers and sisters. I think all of our big deconversion moments are actually just invitations to move deeper into the beautiful and terrifying storm of God's love and grace. When we could have quit, but we didn't, and the not quitting becomes a new resolve that wasn't there before. Why, I sometimes wonder, do we vilify our dark nights of being romanced by deconversion as if these were scandals indicative of some kind of spiritual ineptitude. Doesn't every apprentice know that as the journey toward mastery moves forward, it gets harder, not easier, that there will be seasons of difficulty and struggle? And though we may be guilty of all manner of foolishness, we also arrive to the dark place of confusion and doubt in pain. Pain is pain. We've been hurt. We did plenty of hurting ourselves. If you haven't yet, you will. If you have, you probably will again. There is often immaturity and self-interest in deconstruction, but that doesn't delegitimize our frailty and our weakness and our suffering. And that is why at that crossroads, Jesus appears to beckon us deeper still. So I don't know where you're at or where you've been between these kinds of dark nights of doubt or confusion, maybe just beyond one, maybe on the precipice of another. I don't know where you sit in the long waiting. But I've often thought of church affectionately, almost like a basement recovery program dedicated to faithfulness as an act of rebellion. You know, when addicts shuffle into musty old rooms, sipping bad coffee from styrofoam cups and reminding one another, keep coming back. It works. It works if you work it. Because they've learned the truth about togetherness as the venue for a faithful life of integrity. It works doesn't mean like, oh, here's the infallible secret of victory over addiction. It means if we don't give up on one another, if we don't give up on ourselves, and if we remain faithful, then we can do this together. If you think about that story, here's where I'll end. If you think about that story with Brendan Manning and the gentleman that he met outside that chapel when he was prepared to throw it all away, the difference in the story is that another dude stopped in front of him and said, what happened? One disciple asking another, what's going on? And then saying, you are on the threshold of receiving the greatest grace of your life. One disciple vulnerable before another disciple. That is called church. The church is where we work out salvation with fear and trembling over and against the cynicism and tumult of the world, and where we learn orthodoxy or right belief, what's been most precious to disciples of Jesus around the world for hundreds of years. So down the helter-skelter spiral of cultural insanity and tribal warfare, across the stormy sea of discipleships and doubts, we learn to beckon one another into greater faithfulness. Or we can attempt to stand against the wind and rain alone, our tired legs shaking, ready to give up, no one to hold us up. So my encouragement to you in this season, a season marked particularly by a unique sense of sadness for many, is to ask and wrestle and doubt and grieve and fight, but do it here with others, doing likewise, and don't give up. Do not be as one walking in circles with bread and water in your hands and yet always starving to death. We fall, we get up, we keep walking the road, constantly on the precipice of the greatest grace of our lives, and never beyond the reach of his great, resounding love. All this I have told you so that you will not fall away. Let me pray and ask God's Spirit to come and speak before we respond. Holy Spirit, come. I feel as if, I could be totally wrong, but I feel as if, in a room of this size, it's inevitable that there's going to be someone in the room for whom this kind of thing I'm about to say is applicable. But I feel as if maybe there's someone here that is in a season of uniquely difficult doubt, or even despair is the word that came to mind. But this is something you've yet to disclose to the people closest to you. Or maybe you have, but you have not been honest about the depth of despair that you're experiencing, the depth of doubt and confusion, and that you found a way to be vulnerable just a little bit, to present an affectation of vulnerability without being as honest as this kind of doubt necessitates, because you feel as if the depth of this doubt is too ugly a thing to bring out in front of people. And again, I could be wrong. This could be just me, but I feel as if that's true and that's someone in this room, then maybe what the Spirit of God is saying to you is an encouragement to bring the entirety of your experience out to your community, the people who know and love you, that they can and will handle it because they have the Spirit of God in them as well. And that it's too big a thing to carry by yourself for any longer. God, if any of that's accurate, then would you let those words connect with the person or people for whom they are accurate? If it's not, and for everyone in the room this morning as we observe the sacred season of Advent together as a church with a capital C, would you bring us into a deeper understanding this morning, tomorrow, this week, of what it means to walk faithfully in the long waiting. As we believe in rescue but are waiting to be rescued in full, and we walk with others who experience that pain acutely during the holidays. We love you. In the name of Jesus.